Hello, my name is Caleb Smith with the Rocket Miner newspaper, here to provide your news update for June 20th, 2020. It's a slow news day. Some weekends are like that. I don't really have any updates from the Donald Trump rally in Oklahoma right now. Be looking for that online. Um, we certainly are keeping track of the president's actions and other things as part of the 2020 campaign election coverage. Just having had a little bit more time to think today, I wanted to take some time to draw some attention to a story that some of y'all may not have heard and go a little bit behind the details. I'm citing selections from a opinion piece called "In Moments of Crisis, Communication is Key" by Amos Bridges of the Springfield News Leader. I still have family back in Missouri, and this is close to places that I certainly spent a lot of time at growing up. So I was aware of the fact that a veteran police officer, Mark Preby, was run over back on June 9th. By all accounts, an individual whose name I'm purposely not going to acknowledge with his name, drove through the parking lot, pinned this police officer to a pole with an SUV, causing life-altering injuries. The driver has been charged with first-degree assault and armed criminal action, and allegedly sent a text message a few hours before that said, in part, "I'm going to run over a cop, I think." End quote. Didn't make a big ripple in the media, unless you, like I said, you have connections in that community, which is a shame because this type of thing shouldn't happen. The editor of the paper spent some time in an editorial earlier this week talking about how the newsroom scrambled when they first heard word of the of the attack. We'll call it what it is. And as they gather more information, just how some things changed. He talked about how the initial headline was just a short, quick: "Man shot at Springfield Police Headquarters after officer struck by car." From a editor standpoint, you kind of want your headline to be a little bit more quick, succinct, to the point. The editor notes that a shorter version of the headline, which appeared on the webpage, said only "Man shot at Springfield Police Headquarters." As it was being readied for print, it was further updated to reflect the serious injuries. The headline became "Police, as the police were saying this. Man shot after striking officer with SUV." The editor goes on to acknowledge that he wishes that they'd updated the headline earlier. He notes that while all the headlines were accurate and intended to convey the seriousness of the confrontation, he understood why some people thought that the shorter headline, the less descriptive one, were dismissive of Officer Preby's injuries, or an attempt to stir up antagonism toward belief. Why are you focusing on the fact that he was shot at if you're not mentioning the fact that an officer was run over? He stresses that they were working quickly and trying to put out the best product they have, and every so often there's some oversights. And having been on the receiving end of similar criticism over the years, I I certainly feel for that. One of the other things he notes is that some of the criticism was put out generally and not directly sent to the newspaper. As in, he notes that the local police union was especially critical of their coverage. And there are times where the editor's saying, if you have a problem with our coverage, I wish you'd talk to us. It's a common lament that I've expressed myself. I've heard other bosses that I've had in other newsrooms I've worked in talk about how if you have a problem with our coverage, if you don't tell us about it, it's never, we may not be aware of it. We may not know that we have something to fix, whether it's a misspelling, an error in the story. There are some times where people have told me about something that was messed up years ago, and we want to fix those. That's why we write corrections. That's why we have even done full page clarifications on the front page when necessary, adding more context that was overlooked or incorrectly conveyed. But there needs to be a back and forth dialogue sometimes for these to happen. There are some times where we will catch it ourselves. It's amazing how you can read a story 7 times, go to bed, come back the next day to work, glance at the front page and go, gonna have to write a correction. Let's fix it in the online edition now. And having an open channel of communication is a big part of that. We try to reach out to other people, and sometimes we get the runaround. And I have another reporter who was recently talking about how it's been a couple months since it happened, but he'd run back into some people he'd encountered on the earlier story months prior, and they'd been critical of how the story seemed to mostly be from one perspective. And in this case, we'd spent about 5 weeks trying to get the second party to share its perspectives and respond to issues raised by this other side. And after a certain point, we're going to go forward with the story. And if you've not been participating with it, it is so much harder for us to convey what you're thinking if you don't tell it to us, whether through talking, emails, blog posts, interpretive dance, whatever method best fits your form. We'll try to convey that to the public. When it gets to the end of the summary, or to the editorial, the editor notes that, quote, there are many challenges ahead for the police department, for our community, and for this newspaper. Our lives and our jobs are changing. Reckoning with inequality and the social and economic disruption of a pandemic will be demanding enough. Listening with an open mind will serve us better than reacting to unintended slights. And he ends it with, you've got my number. I hope to hear from you. Similarly, if you want to reach out to the Rocket Miner, our phone numbers in every edition, if you want to reach out to me, the general manager, the reporters, they usually have their emails all by their name, or we also have it in, there's a mini directory on the opinions page that you can get a hold of us, or if you're not sure who to talk to, you can reach out to us and we'll make sure that those connections get made. Having these conversations are important. As part of that, it's also how we write about it's important. The Associated Press announced yesterday that it's making a change to its style guide. Specifically, when talking about a group of people or race, writers are expected to capitalize the B and black. noting that just when it's used in that racial, ethnic, or cultural context, that it's the Associated Press wants to give that more weight, more recognition, acknowledging the history, identity, and community that's all incorporated in. Quoting AP's Vice President of Standards, John Dansenowski. I apologize, John, I can't have gotten that right. But John said, quote, "The lowercase black is a color, not a person." The AP also notes that it will now capitalize indigenous with an I in reference to original inhabitants of a place. The AP says that this has been something they've been debating, researching, bouncing around for the last 2 years. Certainly with the upswing in debate following the death of George Floyd and protests that have followed, that probably hurried along your timetable. For those of you who are wondering, does that mean they're going to capitalize the W in white? The AP said that it expects to make a decision within a month onto whether capitalize the term white when it's used in a similar context. The article notes that among the considerations are what that change might mean outside the United States. The AP does note some other history of style changes, particularly nearly a century ago, W.E.B. Du Bois led a campaign trying to get newspapers to capitalize Negro, saying that a lowercase n was a sign of disrespect and racism. In response to that, the New York Times started following his advice in 1930, calling it an act of recognition and respect for those who'd spent generations in the lowercase. How we write about things, how we think about things, even just how we present things does have an effect. And this is an AP style book from 2009. It's quite worn, and I'll admit I use my electronic copy a lot more than the print one. But this is something that certain newsrooms adopt different style books. The Rocket Miner office. We primarily follow Associated Press style with very few exceptions. And just like I said, just the capitalization or lowercase of a certain letter and how we write and how we approach things does have an impact. One other thing I want to note to wrap up, and it's always funny how some things fall just outside of our print deadline. But for those of you who have been keeping an eye on the Sweetwater County Historical Museum, it has recently been running a contest to name its beaver. And today they announced that the winning selection was Chewie, which had been submitted by 3 Green River siblings. Katie Radke, Sylvia Radke, and their 3-year-old brother Corbin. In honor of coming up with a perfect name for a stuffed beaver, they're going to be receiving a special 500-piece jigsaw puzzle of downtown Green River, created by folk artist Eric Dwaddle. It does note that Paisley Hess, 5, who's also from Green River, was recognized for her runner-up entry, Cloudy. The prize for that, also pretty good name, a package of tree bark pencils. The museum notes that it's reopened to the public. They've moved some things around, including the newly named Chewie's display platform, to open up space and create a one-way tour route marked by arrows. If you want to drop by the museum, you're late to today. and it's closed on Sunday. But you can always take advantage of the summer hours, Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. On number 3 East Flaming Gorge Way. You've hit the courthouse. You're just a pinch off. Admission remains free. This has been Caleb Smith with the Rocket Miner newspaper. Wishing you a good day and a safe tomorrow.